gentlemen, we welcome you live to episode number 23 of the Primetime Rundown Zoom interview series right here on the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Networks. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We cannot thank you enough for joining us on this Thursday evening, or so we think, but I think all of our heads are going absolutely insane, Bob, because it's Thursday, or we think it's Thursday. What month is it? It's June, we think? Yeah, I don't know. Every day seems to be the same, but I'm Joey Jarzynka, and we are pleased to be joined by one of the most noticeable voices in all of professional sports, and most noticeably in the National Basketball Association, in the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks play-by-play man on Fox Sports South, Bob Rathbun. Bob, I cannot thank you enough for joining me here this evening. How are you, and how's quarantine? How's everything going for you?
Well, Joey, thank you. I'm honored to be on with you. One of my very best friends in basketball is an assistant coach at St. Francis, Ron Gagnon.
Oh, yeah.
One of my all-time favorite people. And a shout out to Ron and to fans everywhere. And thank you all for joining tonight. And I'm honored to be with you.
Really, really appreciate it. And to the St. Francis family, Ronnie, you got the shout out from Bob Rathbun.
He is the man.
He really is the man. He's fantastic. So again, for those that are just tuning in for the first time, this podcast is a byproduct of our flagship podcast, the Primetime Rundown. And we interview a whole bunch of personalities, whether it be in the sports field, whether it be in the entertainment field, mainly in the sports field though, but really every single soul except just one who we've had on has had ties to the East Coast, and ties obviously to the East Coast and also to the ACC, which we will get to in just a few moments. But let's get started here, Bob. And you were actually born up here in the New England area in Wakefield, Rhode Island, but then you actually made your way southbound and made your way to your current home now in North Carolina. And you were the sports director of WSTP Radio about 3 decades ago, 1973, but that's where you got started. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Well, it's a great story. It's one I hope will serve young broadcasters as inspiration. My dad was transferred in the company he worked for, and that's how we made our way from Rhode Island to North Carolina. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened for me, because as a 12-year-old, I called a radio station, WSTP, in our town. And a Sunday afternoon, I don't know what prompted me to do it, but I called, and the announcer on duty answered, and he said, "Well, young man, if you're so interested in sports and radio, and you listen to us all the time, why don't you come down and we'll give you a tour of the radio station?" So that began for me and every Sunday ritual where I would go and hang out at the radio station. I was a 12-year-old kid, and I would do what 12-year-olds would do. I, go get the guy a drink and take out the garbage and just try not to be a nuisance. And then one day the sportscaster of the station showed up, and he said, "Well, help us broadcast these baseball games." And we would broadcast American Legion ball in the summertime. And this June, this time of year would be our prime time. This is, basically high school ball in the summer under the Legion banner. And we broadcast the games because the team was so good, and they're still broadcast to this day. So I'm 12, and I go get the guy a Coke and a hot dog and keep scoring a few stats. And he says to me, "Well, you're ready to make your debut." And I said, "Well, I guess I am. I guess let's do it." So I got the mic in the bottom of the 7th inning with this Legion game, and our first baseman hit a home run. And that was my debut in broadcasting. The announcer got the microphone back in the top of the 8th inning, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've been waiting all season to call a home run. And when we hit one, I've got some 12-year-old kid on the microphone." and that announcer was Marty Brenneman.
Oh, my goodness.
And he was just starting his soon-to-become Hall of Fame career. He was just out of North Carolina, had worked in TV in High Point, North Carolina, was working in Salisbury. And it was not too soon after that he left to become the voice of the Tidewater Tides and the Virginia Squires back home. For him, he's from Portsmouth, Virginia, so he went back home. And then in 1974, got the Reds job until he just retired at the end of last season. So that's how it started for me. And I've been doing this ever since. And it's been just a great labor of love. I started in radio and then moved over to TV, and it's just been so much fun. And I hope that I can help young broadcasters like I was helped when I was a young broadcaster. So I'm happy to be here with you tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. It's again really an honor to be speaking with you, because some of the games that you've called, some of the teams that you've worked for, in numerous sports, baseball, basketball,
Mm-hmm.
obviously most notably now with basketball, which we'll get to in just a few moments. But continuing in chronological order, and I'm assuming you watched The Last Dance, so you know how it went
Mm-hmm.
from 1998 all the way back to the beginning of
Right.
Michael Jordan. We're trying to, we'll do a little bit of that, and we'll try and stay on course. But you also got your college degree, bachelor's degree in
Mm-hmm.
speech at Catawba College, if that is pronounced correctly.
Yes.
I
Uh-huh.
believe it is. Yeah,
Catawba College. Yep.
Catawba College in the aforementioned Salisbury,
Mm-hmm.
North Carolina. You also got numerous awards as well for your time there. You're also inducted into the Hall of Fame too. Talk about the feeling of being, one of the students on the school's Mount Rushmore, if you will.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but um, it's a great school, and for me, it was my hometown school, so it was not that big a deal because I'd been on campus the whole time. When I was 16 years old, and the day I got my driver's license, I was working for the radio station and for the newspaper. I wrote for the Salisbury Post, and so being at Catawba was not that big a deal because our station broadcast the games and I was around there all the time. So it was just sort of a natural progression for me to go to Catawba, and loved every second of it. And there were so many things, Joey, that came together for me at that time. Salisbury was the host city until recently of the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association, and every year held their annual awards in Salisbury on the Catawba campus, Keppel Auditorium, and we would bring in all the state winners and whatnot. And as I mentioned, when I got my driver's license, they put me on the transportation committee, which meant drive down to the Charlotte airport and go pick these guys up and bring them back to Salisbury. So I'd have in the back seat of my car Chris Schenkel, Keith Jackson, Lindsey Nelson, the giants of sportscasting and of sports writing too, Jim Murray, Will Grimsley, all these guys. And I'd have them in the car for 45 minutes or so. And you being in New York, I'm sure a lot of Mets fans are watching, and they certainly remember the name Lindsey Nelson, as he was the original voice of the Mets. Well, I had Lindsey in the backseat of my car one day, and I said, Mr. Nelson, I'd like to be a sportscaster like you one day. So do you have any advice that you could share with me? And he said, Robert, if you don't have any talent, dress funny. So if you know about Lindsey Nelson and his outrageous sport coats that he used to wear on the air, you can get a chuckle out of that story.
Wow.
But this was in my hometown of Salisbury. But what it did, Joey, it demystified the business for me. Yeah. These are regular guys, very talented guys, but regular guys and willing to share, willing to help. And what a great way to learn. Every year when they came around, I've been a member of that organization since I was 16. And it has been so fortuitous for me to be associated with them at an early age. Then the other thing that happened was I was on the air full time when I was 19. I was a sophomore in college. The sports guy at WSTP left, and they asked me this, would you like to do it? Of course. So I would go to school full time and I worked full time. So I would start at 6 a.m. Doing the morning sports reports, go to school, which the radio station to campus was about 0.2 of a mile, and hang there, take my classes in the morning, go in the afternoon to the library, get the homework knocked out, back to the station, do the afternoon shows, and then it was on to broadcast a game oftentimes that evening. And I loved every second of it. While I was at Catawba, as you mentioned, I was a speech major, and the head of the department was basically my mentor, Dr. Carl Hales, a dear friend to this day. And he said, you know what? We don't get many guys like you. You know what you want to do. You're already doing what you want to do. So let's tailor your academic profile to match what it is you want to do. And I think this is one of the beauties of the small school. And because I get asked all the time about, should I go to Syracuse? Should I go to Indiana? I said, go somewhere that fits for you, because you may be able to get more done at a small school than you would at one of these big schools. Because if you go to Syracuse, you might not be until a senior before you get your hands on a microphone. Well, at Catawba, you could do it all. And I was working full time, and we would tape games and he would listen to him back and he'd say, that was pretty good. That was terrible. This needs improvement. And I would go back out and do the high school football game the next Friday night, which I would have done anyway. But now I'm getting coached along the way. And so it really helped me become a better broadcaster at a very young age. And everything from voice and diction to stage presence to diaphragmatic support and all the things that we learn along the way, I got when I was basically a teenager. So I was very, very fortunate to come along when I did, where I did, and I owe a great deal to Catawba.
Yeah, and it's just by saying that, Bob, it's soothing almost, because a lot of the aspiring broadcasters such as myself who went to St. John's University to not a big, to not go to a school like a Hofstra nearby from here, or to go to a Syracuse or a Northwestern or wherever the places may be, and to start, or a Fordham. Actually, that I was gonna say that is the that's the Mount Rushmore of broadcasting, but to not go to those places and to start at the bottom, that really is definitely a sigh of relief for some of those that are in a school like those that I had just mentioned.
Right. Well, just, as well. You're familiar with David Halberstam.
Absolutely.
Right. And if you read his announcing tidbits that come out a couple of weeks ago, he did a rundown of announcers that didn't go to the big sportscasting factories. And you will be amazed at how many guys that are in the NBA that did not go to the big schools. There were small school guys and gals, and it's your talent. It's your work ethic. It's your presentation skills. It's your people skills. And, they don't have the quarter market on that. You can do it anywhere, anytime, as long as you are dedicated to your craft. It really matters not where you went to school.
Absolutely. Yeah, you said that perfectly. So now moving forward, at your time at Catawba College, you won something called a Distinguished Alumni Award 1988, and then you were also inducted into the school sports Hall of Fame in 2006. Talk about how good that felt for you to be inducted into this Hall of Fame, or to be again recognized for all of the work that you put into then.
Well, it was very humbling, I must say. There's a lot of people still at Catawba that mean the world to me, and for them to think enough of me and my family to bestow those honors was really something, because as I mentioned, I've been hanging out at Catawba since I was a kid, and to be able to be recognized for the little things that I might have done along the way are pretty significant to me. So it's a great feeling, to be thought of that highly by people that you love so dearly was really great, and something I will always cherish.
Now, you're following your time at Catawba and in North Carolina, you eventually got the call to go even farther south to Georgia and to Atlanta. Let's talk about the start of your Hawks career with Fox Sports South. So talk about the initial phone call that you received from the Hawks, and also from your time with baseball as well, just to get into the professional doorway. Talk about how good that felt, and how all of your work going back to aforementioned college paid off for you.
Well, I'd be happy to. I left Salisbury and I went to Norfolk, Virginia, and I worked there for 14 years, radio first, and then both radio and television. And that is where I got a foray into major college sports. I did William and Mary football and Old Dominion basketball, and that's where I met Coach Gannulin. Ronnie was on the Old Dominion staff. And I also started working AAA baseball. Baseball is something I've always done. I've always done both basketball and baseball, so it wasn't unusual for me to do both. And, I got to Norfolk in 1978, and the summer of 79, I spent in the press box at Met Park in Norfolk. The Tides were the Mets AAA affiliate, and I was there every night covering the team. This is unheard of, that nobody would come. Only the newspaper guy, who happened to be the sports editor of the paper, were there every night. And so the general manager of the Tides, a fellow, God rest his soul, Dave Rosenfield, said, what are you doing here every night? I said, well, I'm covering the team, because I was doing the morning sports on the CBS affiliate there in town. And he said, well, this is interesting. And why are you keeping all these stats on the team? So I proved to him that I love baseball and I love covering the team. And then there was an opening the very next year. And lo and behold, I got the job. And that was my foot in the door, as you mentioned, to professional sports. Now, I had always also at that time started doing regional sports television. Now, this is the advent of the regional sports networks. And back then, we had an outfit called Home Team Sports based out of Washington that's now Masson.
Oh, yeah.
Home Team Sports did the Orioles and the Caps and the then Bullets, but they also did college sports. And that was at a time when in Virginia, we were all in the same conference, basically, from Old Dominion, William and Mary, James Madison, Richmond, VCU, you name it, we were all together. So they needed somebody to help out. And I got a chance to do college basketball, but that also gave me an opportunity to fill in for Mel Proctor, who was the voice of the Orioles and the Bullets from time to time. So I got a foot in the door doing NBA and Major League Baseball, and did my first Orioles game in 1987. So that was a significant portion of my career. This is leading up to your question about it coming to Atlanta, but I worked there, went to Detroit for 3 years, and I know you want to talk about that too, from 92 to 94. But the whole time I have been doing college basketball, and I've been doing ACC games for Raycom and Jefferson Pilot now for 31 years. I still do them. And one of my producers, a fellow by the name of Steve Craddock, left to become the coordinating producer and later the executive producer of Sports South here in Atlanta. And they had an opening to do the Braves and the Hawks. And because I did basketball and baseball year round together, he thought I'd be the perfect guy. And I did both. And that's what got me here in Atlanta in 1996.
So, and just by doing those two, you were able to get or to land that pair. Now, originally, when you were told that, did you ever think to yourself, well, okay, this is a fantastic opportunity. You can never say no to an opportunity like that. But how, and this is actually going back to now your time in the Mid-Atlantic region or in the DMV area. Whenever there was crossover season with basketball and then baseball, how did that affect your workload as a play-by-play broadcaster?
Well, when I was in Hampton Roads, not too severely. I would run into a conflict or two in September when William and Mary football began, or I had a college football game and the Tides were maybe in the playoffs, in the International League playoffs. But the GM, Dave, always fancied himself. He wanted to be a broadcaster to begin with, so he didn't mind stepping in and filling in if I had a conflict. And by the time, we never did exhibition games, baseball. So the regular season would start, 1st of April, and the college season, basketball season was long since over by then. So I really did not have the crossover like I have had now. One of the reasons I don't do the Braves anymore is because the crossover was too great. I was doing 225 events a year, which is wonderful, except, it just kills you. And to stay on top of the big leagues and the NBA at the same time, you can imagine. And I'm more recognized in Atlanta for the Hawks than the Braves. And the Braves wanted their own crew, and I don't blame them. And once we got all the rights back in 2006 or 7 or whenever it was, that's when we sort of went our separate ways. And they had their own crew, and I did the Hawks, and I've been doing them ever since, and it's been great.
Yeah, you've been, and just to bring up again, the time when you were working with, with the Braves, you were the voice of the Braves from 97 to 2006. As you brought up earlier, you worked with the Baltimore Orioles on the TV side part-time, again, as you said. But it's, just even that thought. And now, again, the thought of the crossover, because you'd think to yourself, well, now you see a lot of these guys, like let's say up here, you have Michael Kay and the Yes Network. They travel down to Florida for spring training. Did you ever have to do that when you were with the Braves.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And I had some interesting nights. Not only spring training, but regular season, because in those early April games, I had to do both, and it was going back and forth. And I remember one year, the Hawks played in Toronto on a Tuesday night, and I took the charter back to Atlanta with the team, and I was on the 8 a.m. flight the next morning to Los Angeles, and I did the Braves and Dodgers that night at Chavez Ravine, which was fine, except the game went 12 innings, and body time, it was about 2 a.m, and I'm literally pounding the coffee and doing everything I can to try to keep the energy up. And Javi Lopez, our catcher, hit a home run to win it in the 12th inning. And my home run call was something like this: fly ball, deep left, it's gone. I was so tired. And I can't remember who was with me. Brett Butler, maybe. He started laughing at me. But it was that. So, that's the overlap for you, right?
Yeah.
Then I was like, oh my gosh, will this game ever end? I just want to go to sleep.
Yeah, it's crazy because, you think to yourself, especially, when you want to be a broadcaster, you say to yourself, well, did you ever put all of the factors together and say, okay, well, can I handle this? Can I do this? But you've also done, Bob, you've done college football. You've done the College World Series. You brought up how you've done ACC basketball. You touched upon your time with the then Washington Bullets. But now you actually do, and we'll actually save the best for last, which is the Hawks, but the WNBA you do, and you're the voice of the Atlanta Dream. So now that overlap season doesn't really happen because you have about a month in between the NBA and the WNBA season?
Yeah, generally, the WNBA is going to tip off around Memorial Day in a normal year.
Yeah.
And be done, regular season should be done by Labor Day, playoffs into late September, maybe early October, depending on the calendar. The WNBA season gets truncated every 4 years because of the Olympics, so that makes it a little odd. But, generally it's over with by the time, the new Hawk season rolls around. And, as when I was doing baseball, the final game of the regular season would be on Sunday in late September, and the Hawks media day would be the next Monday.
Oof.
So you just go from one to the other. But, when you do this, that's a minor inconvenience. You're so pumped to get the new season going and finish off the old baseball season. So, it worked out great. And the 10 years I did the Braves, we were in the playoffs, 9 of them. So even though we didn't get to do playoff games, we still had our pre and post game shows on Fox. And so we were at the ballpark and we're going to playoff games and World Series and still traveling. So it was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And you actually brought up the fact that, 9 out of those 10 seasons with the Braves while you were on the call, they made the playoffs. But now with the Hawks, I believe in your first 8 seasons, or your first 3 seasons in Atlanta, they made the playoffs right away. Or let me rephrase that. With the Hawks, right away, they made the playoffs. And then 8 consecutive seasons of not making the playoffs. And then it was a little, lopsided where, again, 8 consecutive years of not making it. And then I believe it was 9 or 10 consecutive years of making it. And now we're going through a little bit of a rebuild here following the Al Horford era and the Mike Budenholzer era. So let me get this straight, Bob. How is it as a play-by-play man, do you feel a little, let's call it spoiled, if you will, when you go right into it winning a lot and you're able to call a lot of wins, but now, you're seeing the opposite side of winning. Now you're seeing a little bit of, losing, if you will. I don't want to use that word as much as I don't want to use that word a lot, but what would be your thought on that as a play-by-play man? Do you get a little spoiled when there's a lot of winning and then eventually the losing starts to happen?
Well, I think we all do. It's the best part of our business when the team wins, because when the team wins, ownership's happy, the general manager's happy, the coach is happy, the players are happy, the audience is happy. But when you're losing, it's a little tougher. Winning and losing, shouldn't affect your broadcast at all. And I trust that it hasn't affected mine. Yeah, you're the fan in you wants them to win, but it really doesn't change what we do. In fact, when the losing comes, we actually have to work a little harder because you don't have the casual fan tuning in like they would have had they been winning all along. So each has a unique challenge, I must say, but it sure is a lot more fun when you're winning.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I learned many years ago is that if you use up all of your notes on a call, that means that you did not prepare enough, especially on a game like on a losing game for the Hawks or any other team. That's definitely tough. So now your time with the Hawks. You are paired with one of the best basketball players of all time and one of the best ever to play in an Atlanta Hawks uniform, number 21, Dominique Wilkins. Talk about your time being paired with him, and not only that, but also the chemistry that you two have built over the years.
Well, we go back a long way. We talked earlier about my time in my hometown of Salisbury, North Carolina, and one of my jobs was to broadcast the Salisbury High School basketball and football games. And one year, it was Dominique's junior year at Washington, North Carolina High School. Our teams actually met in the state tournament. I was calling the game and Nick was playing. So I first laid eyes on Dominique Wilkins as a high school junior. And then I had a chance to televise one of his games at Georgia in the NIT, and then did the latter stages of his pro career on television. And of course, he's been my partner for the last 10. It is so great because we know each other so well and have been friends for so long that that chemistry that you mentioned just sort of happens because I know so much about Neek that something will happen in the game, and I know that's something that he can relate to. So to get him talking about a story about Bernard King or Julius Irving or something like that is very easy because I've heard all the stories, first of all, but I know how to bring it out of him and have fun with him. And he's one of those guys that you can have a lot of fun with. You know, he doesn't take himself too seriously. You know, we'll put up a stat like there was a game last year, the year before, where one of our guys moved past him in career assists for the Hawks. And of course, we just unloaded on him. How can you be in the top 5 in assists? You never passed the ball, blah, blah, blah. All you did was shoot. All you did was dunk, you know. So we, you know, it's those kinds of things that builds that chemistry, and the audience loves it because everybody loves Dominique Wilkins. The man's got a statue out in front of our arena. He's the icon of the franchise and will always be. There'll never be another Dominique.
Yeah, it's really a lot of fun to hear you guys. I have not heard one in the last year because I didn't renew my NBA League Pass here, but yeah, I know. I know I do apologize. That's yes, I know. Bad. But I have heard a lot of good stories though from this past year. My cousin actually lives in Alpharetta, not too far.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Not too far in Atlanta or from Atlanta. But sticking to topic here now, 2014-15, a big year for the Hawks. And for most of my teenage years, actually, I always knew of the Atlanta Hawks as one of the best teams or consistent teams in basketball. So the 2014-15 season was a 60-win season for you guys. And just by looking at the names of the guys, and I'll never forget it, I remember either on my fantasy team or who we were talking about in school, in high school, whatever it was. And I remember thinking Paul Millsap, Al Horford, Jeff Teague, Thabo Cephalosha, the list goes on. Dennis Schroeder, another one. That 19-game win streak, I'll never forget that. Now, talk about that time for you as a broadcaster calling. I don't know if you were on the call for all 19. I don't know if there were any TNT games in the middle. I don't know.
No, we had them all.
You guys had them all. So that 19-game streak, a winning streak. Talk about the feeling of you and Will calling those 19 consecutive games and just thinking, wow, this is like a honeymoon for us.
Yeah, it's a magic carpet ride. Most fun I've ever had broadcasting, no question. I had a minor league hockey team in Norfolk that won a couple of championships, but nothing could compare to winning. I mean, 19 games in an NBA season is a quarter of your schedule, and unheard of. It's never been done, an unbeaten month like we had in January of 2016. The team had outrageous chemistry. It just sort of fell together. It wasn't a grand plan by any means. We struggled early. I think we were 7-6. Had a turnaround game against the Raptors near Thanksgiving that sort of got us going in late November and early December, and then we really kicked it in with that 19-game winning streak. But for Hawks fans who have been so long suffering, always to be the bridesmaid, always to come up short, whether it was Larry Bird beating Neek in game 6 and 7, the frustration of never being able to get over the hump in the East, losing to Michael all those years with a great club back in the late 90s. For the first time, Hawks fans could come to the arena with the expectation of winning. And it was so special, Joey, that to see the whole town turned on. That's happened a couple of times here in Atlanta. The Braves did it in 91 with the worst of first. And they were playing in the West, so everybody's up till 2 a.m. watching the games out in the West Coast.
Right.
It happened, of course, a couple of times with the Falcons going to the Super Bowl. But this is the first time in a long time since those Neek teams where Atlanta, the Hawks were the thing. And it was the place to be. And it was the place to watch. And I am convinced that had we stayed healthy, we were going to the NBA Finals. I think we would have beaten LeBron, and I think we would have gone to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, by the time we got to LeBron, we were so banged up, there's no way we could have beaten him. But had we stayed healthy, I think we would have been there. Now, I don't know if we'd have beaten Golden State, but I think we would have been to the finals. And there's no telling what that would have meant to our city, to our franchise, to finally get there. That's the first time a Hawks team's ever been to the Eastern Conference Finals. Now, when we first moved here in 68 and 69 and 70, we went to the Western Conference, what would be considered the Western Finals these days, but never in the East. We switched over to the East in 70, 71. So this was a remarkable year. And we were it. I often kid people. I say, when you're the big thing in town is when you go to the dry cleaners and you drop off your shirts, and the little old lady behind the counter hands you your shirts, and she says, "Aren't our Hawks doing well?" The whole town is wrapped up in what they're doing. And it was great. The ratings were through the roof. The arena was jammed every night. It was so much fun. And it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to look at it and to say to yourself that, just a few years prior to that year, you had obviously the Thrashers move to Winnipeg, and you say to yourself, well, now it's very difficult to not only, did you feel as a play-by-play man once the Thrashers left that, obviously you'd have some more eyes on the Hawks because obviously in addition to the Falcons, you have the Hawks now, but you also lose that other winter sport in hockey in the Atlanta area. But even just to, tune in and you get that casual fan, did you feel that, you had a few more eyes on you ever since they left in 2011, 2012 and, you got that spark?
Yeah, not really. We had some good Hawks teams, but the sad part about the Thrashers is that we owned both teams.
Yeah.
So we did so much in concert with them as a company. It just broke our hearts to see them leave. And we didn't get in fact, it was probably the opposite. There was more ill will against that ownership group for losing the hockey team and letting them go that any kind of bump that we could have gotten from the Hawks, because we were tied inextricably together. And no, the feeling in town was not that. It was not one of euphoria that, we're going to make some hay now that the Thrashers are gone. Right? It was just the opposite, that everybody was so upset that they left. And, we built the arena for both teams.
Right.
I mean, it was bad, because this is the second time Atlanta's lost an NHL team, and the stain of losing a major league franchise like that hurts to this day. I mean, I'm a huge hockey fan. I broadcast minor league hockey, and it was just crushing, just crushing.
It's tough. Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I brought that up is because, you think to yourself, you had said about the casual fan earlier. I figured there was a possibility where those fans may not have, jumped ship and liked the Winnipeg Jets, and maybe, well, you know what, maybe, with the casual Atlanta fan, possibly, well, you know what, I now the Thrashers are gone, let me move over to the Hawks and watch them a little bit more. And then that, for you guys, that would be.
And Joey, I'll tell you, they weren't the same fans either. I mean, the hockey fan was the hockey fan. Yeah. They were not the NBA fan. The NBA fan was not the hockey fan. Right. So you would think, you might get a bump, but that wasn't the case here. We had a few crossovers. I mean, we had people who had season tickets for both, but generally speaking, the Thrasher fans were hockey, and that's it.
Hockey centric. Yeah, absolutely. So now there have been times, Bob, when you have called some nationally televised games on NBA television and also on Turner Sports, TNT. So now a lot of these nationally televised games, I have to ask you, did they involve the Hawks or not?
The NBA TV games generally were Hawks games. I can't think of a time where wasn't, because what NBA TV does is they take the home feed and they take what they call a clean feed and then put in their own graphics and stuff like that. But they take the pictures and the audio from us. So I think every time on NBA TV was a Hawks feed. TNT, I had to fill in for Marv one night. He got snowed in New York, and it just happened to be a Hawks game. But I, over the years, I worked for ESPN for a long time, did the NCAA tournament for CBS and regular season games. So I've had the chance to do non-Hawks games on a national stage.
Yeah, and that was actually the next question I was going to ask you. As a play-by-play man, for someone that's been doing a one team or working for a team such as the Hawks and for the Braves, your voice, your preparation, the way that your delivery is obviously biased towards the home team. But now when you work for TNT and for a Hawks game, I have to ask you this. This is a tough one, Bob. How difficult is it to stay unbiased at the national level, especially calling your Hawks?
Well, the only thing, the advantage it gives you is you got the knowledge that nobody else has around your team. But I think you understand early on what your role is. And I think for those of us, like Mike Breen, I'm thinking of the New York guys, and Ian and all those guys, it's not that hard for us to shift gears to move from the Knicks or the Nets or the Hawks to doing a national game, because that's what we do with college all the time. I do an ACC game. I don't have a rooting interest. So, doing a Hawks, Bulls game on TNT, that's fine. I just don't have, I think if you do this for as long as we've done it, those things kind of go by the wayside.
Yeah. Well, that's really good. I've heard a few of the broadcasters that we've spoken to, for some, it's been a little bit of a difficult transition. But really for you, which is fantastic, it hasn't been, which is great.
Yeah. Only because I've had to do so many games where I'm a neutral party, I'm Switzerland. So, it's not that hard. It's not that tough.
Now take us through a typical game day for you, Bob. Let's go with a home game. So your preparation when you get to the arena, how you prepare for a game, especially when you have, or going back to your time when you would do the Braves and the Hawks. How difficult was it for prep? And then also, for having lunch or having a solid dinner, or drinking a certain amount, making sure you don't have to go to the bathroom during during the game?
I try to work a couple of weeks out, and I think that helps, because you like basketball, hot and heavy. I'll have college games and then Hawks games and travel. So we'll just deal with it from the basketball side. If I can work 2 weeks out, which means taking a look at that calendar and see what's coming and who's coming, that doesn't make the game day prep like cramming for a final exam. You can kind of spread it out. So you're watching the video. If I've got the Knicks coming up, then I can keep my eye on New York. I can start taking a look at the notes and start the game summaries and just kind of following New York to get ready for our game. And I do that with my college games too. Like I'll have a Pitt Notre Dame game that I know I've got to go to South Bend. Okay. And it might be for me a back-to-back, like the Hawks are in Chicago on a Saturday or Friday, let's say. Then Saturday, I've got to drive over to South Bend and do Pitt Notre Dame. Well, I've got Pitt Notre Dame on the radar for a couple of weeks. So I'm calling coaches and sports information, and I'm getting everything lined up so I can make that jump right to South Bend, driving over on Saturday morning and do the game. And if it feel like, I know both teams very, very well. So I just think working in advance is a big key. But a typical game day for me, for the Hawks, starts about 7 a.m. Like most of us, we're checking the daily newspapers and clippings and game summaries and all the stuff that we need for that day. But I've found over the years that one big thing that helps me is to watch the games for that other team. I try to watch their last 3 to get ready. And you can watch an NBA game in about an hour, so I won't save it all up for that morning. But if they play the night or 2 nights before, then I'll watch the whole game and the morning of the game just to get familiar with who's hot, who's not, who's hurt, what's going on, what's the flavor, who's had a good month and all that stuff, and then sort of apply it to the matchup that night. Because as you know, the NBA is a game of matchups, and one night you might struggle against one team, but have a good night the next night against another team. So just try to lay all that in. I think for those of us who have been doing it a while, the internet is a blessing and a curse. You could spend all day going through all this stuff. I mean, there's just such a tonnage of information. But I think the other good thing about experience is you kind of know what to look for. You can weed through most of the stories and most of the detail. But I will tell you, young broadcasters, this. I often get asked preparation questions because that's something I have done religiously, and I appreciate that. But I get my best stories, my best information from talking to people, talking to the other broadcaster, talking to the assistant coaches, people around the game, scouts that are at the game. Give me my best stuff without fail. The preparation's key. Yeah, obviously you have to do it, but I have found that getting a few minutes with an assistant coach or with the PR guy, this is at the pro level, getting with the other broadcasters, radio and TV. Hey, what's going on? Who's been, blah, 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 serves me so well. And it really solidifies the preparation you've done before you get to the arena. There's many a morning, the other TV play-by-play guy will call each other. What's going on? Who's active? Who's hurt? Who's going to start tonight? And we'll both go to shoot around. We'll both have the information. 1 o'clock, we'll call each other. And that saves so much time. Hey, Bob, for Cleveland, so-and-so's out. Kevin Love's out. Sexton's out. Don't worry about them. Plug in so-and-so. And it really does help a great deal.
Yeah, and it just shows that the whole broadcasting community is almost like a family, especially at the pro level where you guys are, and you guys are able to pick up the phone and just dial their number, which is fantastic. To be able to do that. I know on the college level, sometimes at the lower level, and I'm sure you may have had some, I would say, encounters with that, where you're able to speak with the SID or the sports information director, or you're able to speak with the radio person or anything along those lines. How different is it going to the college level when you're doing preparation? Is that a little bit different, like less or more potentially, or roughly the same?
It's different. It's the same in a lot of regards, but it's different too. They don't have the information like we have it in the NBA, and for good reason. I mean, it's college basketball. It's not the pros. You're not going to have the detailed information like we have it up here. But I just think that makes you work a little bit harder. Cultivate those relationships with assistant coaches. They're the ones that are in charge of the scouting reports. They're the ones that are in charge of, piecing that practice plan together for the head coach and all that stuff. And they can give you insights as to what's happening with their team. The problem with college is that when you're coming in with your team, you're not going to be viewed as anything but, an outsider. I'm not going to give you information because you might go run it and tell the head coach.
Yeah.
But you've got to develop that relationship with these guys, especially, your conference members. You might not see the non-conference guy again the rest of your life, but you're going to be playing the same 8 or 9 teams in your conference every time. And over the years, as you build your reputation as a broadcaster, you'll be known as a trusted source. Now, you're not going to betray confidences. That's not the point of this. You're just trying to get a handle on the opponent that night. So I would work very hard. Sports information is a must. I mean, and you run into some guys that are really good and some that are not. That's kind of the way it goes. There's 350 Division I teams. You're not going to have 350 all-stars in the sports information office, but you got to make it work. One thing that I did early when you used to subscribe to newspapers is that I would subscribe to all the newspapers in my conference. When I was doing Old Dominion, we were in the Sun Belt. So I would get the Richmond Times-Dispatch, the Tampa Tribune, the Jacksonville. I get all the papers in the league delivered to me. And then I could cut up the papers, and not just sports, but anything that was going on campus, and just throw it in my Jacksonville folder, throw it in my South Alabama folder, throw it in my UAB folder for when we get ready to play them. Now you can do it online, and it might cost you a few pennies with newspaper subscriptions. But if I was doing the North Atlantic Conference, I would be wired into all of the teams in that conference on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Set up Google alerts 365 days a year. If there's anything moving with St. Francis basketball or anybody that we play, I got it. And if you stay on top of it like that, you'll be surprised the respect that you gain when you go to the SID, when you go to the assistant coach, talk to the head coach. The information that you have was, this guy's done his homework, or this lady's done her homework. We recognize that. That's good. That shows me a lot of initiative, and they'll be more forthcoming with you. I would try to schedule an interview with the head coach. Absolutely.
Yeah, it just shows that you care, and it just shows that you want to do it and you want to be there as well, and which is great, because I've come across broadcasters who very simply, they ask you one question, they say, okay, well, and then we'll go over here, and then they completely bomb the broadcast, and then it just doesn't look good, and then you see the decline in viewership when you have a few bad things. So it definitely shows in the effort that you put out. Bob, now what would be the best in the pros, the best road city, the best road arena for you in your time in the NBA?
Well, the road arena is wherever it's packed. I love the big crowd, and I don't care if it's Madison Square Garden or Oklahoma City or anywhere in between. If it's jumping, I love it because it makes the broadcast come to life, and that's what I care about. If the arena is going to be half empty, then it's down on my list. But we don't have many nights like that around the NBA. Now, the cities, because I did baseball, I'm used to going to all these places in the summertime. And I tell my Hawks friends, when it's 78 below in Chicago, I say, you really like this place in July. But January, it's a little cool. But the cities are what you make it, I think we all have our favorites, To me, I love going to Dallas as much as I love going to Toronto. Coming to New York is always special. It's great to go to Miami in January and thaw out for a few days. So, it's great to go to Los Angeles and San Francisco and Portland. I mean, it's just wonderful. There's not too many bad stops in our league, I'll tell you that. And even though, like an OKC or a Milwaukee, some of the smaller towns, Minnesota, something like that, the people are so fabulous. You can't wait to get there to see them. So, as you mentioned earlier with the broadcasters, it's a brotherhood amongst all the teams in the league, and it's just great. And I just can't express to you how wonderful and what a privilege it is to do this and how much we miss it, because this is our lifeblood. This is what we do. And not to be able to go to practice and go to a game and get on a plane and go to another city is like tearing us apart. We don't know what this is like. Yeah. And it's robbing us of our livelihood and a lot of people's livelihood. We got 40 million people in this country out of work. And it's just hard. We just got to get through this.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely difficult. And, now on a more positive note, if you will, with everything going on and the possibility of some people or some play-by-play broadcasters and analysts not being able to go to Disney, to go to Disney World and go to the complex, or potentially broadcast from a remote location somewhere where there was some rumor. Kevin Harlan said that there would be games called in Atlanta at Turner Studios. Now, for you as a play-by-play broadcaster, I'm assuming you've never done that in your time calling games, but I know ESPN does that for some college games. So I don't know if you've ever done that, but if you have,
I have.
What is it? So now, what is that like for you? And it's different.
It's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard. I have done in our studio, a lot of times I've filled in for guys doing a college soccer game or doing a college, I'm trying to think. I've done field hockey. I've done soccer. I've done men's and women's basketball in the studio. It's tough. I'm not going to lie to you. And this is with crowds, at these games. So you have some effects. To do them now with no crowds is really going to be hard. Because you feed off that enthusiasm. Somebody scores a goal, a dunk or something like that, and you generally would just rise with the crowd. That's not going to happen. And there's not going to be any remotely done in the arena broadcasting probably until they get to the conference finals. So it's all going to be done remotely in the studio. So these guys and ladies have a big challenge coming their way. In a couple of weeks, I'm going, in fact, to Indianapolis to broadcast the TBT, the $1 million winner take all. So Fran Fraschilla is my partner. The tournament is going to be at Nationwide Arena in Columbus, but we are going to be broadcasting the games from Indianapolis, from a studio there. So I'm telling Fran and Seth and Dan Dockage, I'm saying, guys, get ready, because it's different. You're so used to going into the arena 3 hours before the tip, and you go to the press room and you get a little bite to eat, and then it's out onto the court. You're talking to the coaches and the referees, and you got none of that. Yeah. So we walk into a studio, and whenever they fire up the cameras is when we get a peek inside the arena. You have no feel for what's going on inside the arena. None. Yeah. And that will be as difficult a thing to overcome for the play-by-play guys in the NBA as anything, because you're so used to being there, and to not really is going to be different.
Well, now the one positive though, Bob, if I'm not mistaken, is obviously ever since the last time that you called a game in studio was, I'm assuming, a few years ago, or?
Yeah, it's been probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. So you would figure now, I would assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, would be I did read that there were obviously some they had said that, I don't know if it's for the TBT or maybe even for Major League Baseball or wherever it may be, that the the monitors, they would be able to have, like, it would be different camera angles that they'd be able to experiment with. And obviously now with the TBT, it's 3-on-3. So really there's
No. It's full court.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yes.
not the big 3. This is 5-on-5.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes. I do apologize. Yes.
That's okay.
Yes. So right. With the TBT. Yeah. So it's 5-on-5. So now, with that being said, now there's going to be more camera angles for you to figure.
Maybe.
Possibly.
But here's the thing about doing these games in the studio. You can only see what the camera sees.
Yeah.
No matter if they've got 100, it doesn't. You can only see what they've got up on the big screen. Now, when we did our basketball and those other events, we had all 4 cameras, 5 cameras on display all the time. You can only look at one place. So you're watching the on-air feed 90% of the time. You can kind of glance out of the corner of your eye to see another camera, but it really doesn't do you any good. You've got to be able to match your words to what the audience can see. So you're watching just the on-air feed to do the play-by-play. And you're so used to being able to look down, look at your notes and catch up, because you get a sense of where the ball is on the field, whether it's soccer match or whatever. But basketball is so fast, you can't take your eyes off of it.
Yeah.
And not being there, it's going to be tough. There's no doubt. Especially like TBT. I know this is the 3rd year I've done it, so I know most of the guys on the better teams. But if some of these other clubs come from nowhere and get to the quarterfinals, it's like, who are these guys?
Yeah.
You got to really do your homework and know them, because it's not just the uniform number. You've got to know what they look like and how they act, and because to pick it up, basketball like that. So this is going to be a challenge. There's no doubt. And I'll tell you something else too, is the technology. We're so used to having a stats guy, a stage manager, the stat monitor in front of us. Well, by the time all these signals bounce off all these satellites and finally get back to you, there's going to be a delay.
Right.
So if I remember doing a basketball game in the studio, and I said during one of the timeouts, I said to the director in Atlanta, I said, give me a shot of the UAB bench. Great.
Yeah.
So he hollers down the line to the people in the truck it was Texas El Paso. They said, Bob wants a shot of the UAB bench. Great. Here it comes. 1001, 1002, 1003. By the time it got back to us in Atlanta, the timeout was over. We're back on the air. And what I was looking for, the time had passed. So we've got to figure out a way to get the instant communication from the table on scoring, fouls, all of that in real time, so we can relay it in real time.
Right.
And try to piece it all together and not being in the arena.
Yeah.
It's a challenge.
It's definitely going to be brutal. And just to think about the fact that not only you're going to be broadcasting that in a studio in Indianapolis, you're one of the few that are actually going to be able to now, see it firsthand and be able to do it, because now we've seen, obviously, no other professional sports have started yet. The only one is NASCAR, where Mike Joy has been doing it from Charlotte every week in NASCAR. So now we'll get to see Bob Rathbun doing it in Indianapolis on
TBT is back to save America.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. So now, obviously, as we're talking about the coronavirus and everything that's going around now, and during this or where we are here in New York, pause, or for other places, shelter in place, or simply stay inside. Let's go back to March 11th, and that will forever be engraved in our heads, Bob, as the day that, or March 11th and 12th, the day that sports came to a complete halt. And I don't know if you've seen on social media, there was back, I think it was on March 13th or a few days after, there was a whole list, and it went from, I think it was early at like 7 a.m. all the way down to 11:30 at night, when Fred Hoiberg for Nebraska had a bad cold or had the flu. They thought it was the coronavirus. Right. And it went from, and it's like a whole picture. And I say to myself, well, there was also, I believe it was the Pelicans and the Kings. That game was postponed following the announcement that Rudy Gobert was tested positive for the coronavirus.
Mhm.
Now, just the night before, the Hawks unfortunately fell in overtime to the Knicks.
Unfortunately for us.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So had fallen there. And now, with that being said, what went through your mind knowing, or not even knowing, but just the thought that your season could come to a screeching halt in a matter of seconds?
Well, you got to go back to the circumstances. We look at it now a lot differently than we did that night. None of us thought that we would be on this June 18th where we are. We thought there'd be an interruption for a while and then we get back to playing. So we never really grasped the enormity of the moment until after the game is over and we finally figure out what's going on and get back to the back. And by that time, they had separated us. The locker rooms had been closed. And now remember, this game's going overtime. Yeah. It was such an odd night, Joey, because several things were happening. Number one, we had just gotten all the social distancing directives from the league. Okay. They were put in on Tuesday. This is Wednesday. So by the time we get to the arena, this is the first time the coaches are secluded. There's 6 feet, 8 feet separation with the pregame media time for Mike Miller, for Lloyd Pierce. Locker rooms are closed. So we're just getting a handle on how to operate. Okay. Now we look back at it now. It's, well, of course, but that back then, a little different mindset. So now the game starts. And we start hearing later in the second half, there are some problems in Oklahoma City, and we're not quite sure what's going on. Now, remember, we're on the air during the game, okay? So we're starting to hear that, the season is going to be postponed. Well, I'm talking to my producer and Jill Gossard Cook, and I'm saying, Jill, have you gotten anything from the league? No. I said, well, let's hold off. We're not going to respond to anything that's on Twitter. Let's just see what happens. We'll get word when they tell us that there's going to be a suspension of play. Now, the Knicks have this 20-some-odd point lead, okay? And here comes Trae Young having a fourth quarter for the ages while we are trying to piece together just what the heck is going on out here. Yeah. So here comes Trae, 27 points in the fourth quarter, leading this tremendous Hawks comeback. I'm trying to broadcast the game while we're trying to figure out what is happening. What is going on? They postponed the game? What has happened? Remember, they're an hour behind us. They're in Central Time.
Right.
So now the Hawks tie the game, and we get word that it's official. The NBA season is going to be suspended after play of this evening. So we put that out there, and I no more get the words out of my mouth that stay with us. We've got Hawks Live postgame shows coming up. They're working feverishly to put all the pieces together. Let's see how this game ends. And of course, it goes into overtime. So we have no more time to think about it. We got to go to the overtime period. Now the Knicks stretch the lead out and they're going to win the game.
Yeah.
Well, word has gotten to our bench to get Vince Carter in the game.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now Neek and I are saying, well, this is nice, get Vince out there and who knows, when we're going to play again. But so he comes in and the game's over. And Trae gives him a pass, and he steps up the three-point line and drains the three-pointer. Yep. Game ends, and we go to the postgame show. And I said something like, Vince Carter leaves the court a hero. Who knows, when we come back. Well, we never came back. And that was his last shot of his career. But we didn't know it then. Yep. So all that is happening. And then, Joey, we walked to the back, and then it hit us all. Just the enormity of what has happened. And one of the most bizarre nights of all of our careers. Mike Breen was there doing the game for the Knicks. And Mike and I were talking after we got off the air before we walked back to the back. And I said, are you guys going to get to go home? what is happening? What's going on? And everybody, we had no idea what was going on. And I said, buddy, I don't know when I'm ever going to see you again. So it was just a weird night. And then we just left and we haven't been back since. I have not been back to downtown Atlanta since. And just so surreal. You just couldn't believe what was happening.
Yeah, I remember, like I said, that day, or the day, what was it, Thursday, the day after, and when we were at Madison Square Garden, and they had postponed or following the first half of St. John's and Creighton in the Big East tournament. Right. I remember saying, wow, I can't believe that they're playing in front of no fans and in front of about 200 family members. And with everything that was going on, you say to yourself, this is really crazy. And, okay, well, the NCAA tournament's canceled. The NBA season is postponed. And again, going back to the aforementioned list that I was talking about and seeing, Fred Hoiberg coughing up a lung the night before. And you say to yourself, well, especially after last night, we don't know if he has whatever. And, when are we going to be able to get back into the new normal? And we don't even know what the new normal will look like.
No, we don't.
Right now, that new normal, Bob, for you is obviously going to the studio. But on a more positive note, in the fourth quarter of our interview here, it's amazing to see Trae Young do amazing things, and also with Cam Reddish obviously as well on the roster, and John Collins as well, another one who is beginning to blossom into a superstar in the making. But also, as you mentioned earlier about Vince Carter, how cool, Bob, is it to call, or was it to call the last shot for Vince Carter in his illustrious career? You were the one calling it.
Well, it's going to go down that way, but I sure didn't think it at the time.
Yeah.
I had no idea we weren't going to be playing any more basketball. I got much more of a kick out of the dunk he had to get to 25,000 points the year before because I knew that was coming, and I could plan it and prepare for it. But this one I never in a million years thought that would be his last shot. I thought we would go back to play at some point. And I have said publicly since, I said, you know what? When we get back, whenever that is, December, and we get fans back in the stands, not until we get fans back in the stands, we need to petition the NBA to let Vince Carter come back to us on a one-day contract and start the game with a dunk. And, both teams agree to it. And just let him go down there and get a lob from Trae and dunk one and then say goodbye. And we can give him a send-off that he deserved. Had we known that night, it reminds me of what my old high school coach used to say. If you knew where you're going to die, you'd never go near the place. If we knew that was going to be his last shot, we would have done something a little more special.
Right.
But we had no idea. Nobody did. Even Vince, after the game, said, well, I don't know if that's the last one. That's pretty good, but I think we'll be back and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, I got to call it, but it sure feels hollow right now. I want him to come back. I want him to play one more game, get out there, have a ceremonial dunk, and let us give him the love that he deserves, because what an amazing career. He's older than Trae Young's father.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he's like 6 months older than Lloyd Pierce, our coach. So, I mean, it's crazy. Yeah. The role that he played mentoring these young guys and keeping himself prepared to play an NBA game. He was not on the roster just to have him. I mean, he was a contributor. He was in our rotation, and great guy. He's going to make $1 zillion as a broadcaster, and good for him. He's great for the game and a great human being.
Really good stuff there with Vince Carter, especially someone who will be no doubt about it, a Hall of Famer in due time for sure. Mm-hmm. Now, again, Bob, I can't thank you enough for joining us here. We have 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Sure,
with you?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. I just want to make sure I don't want to take up too much of your time,
good.
even though just making sure. Again, for those that are just tuning in, that is Bob Rathbun. I'm Joey Jarzynka. Cannot thank you enough for joining us here on this Thursday evening. But as we continue to close out episode number 23, let's do it. So you have a plethora of awards, Bob, and 10-time Southeast Regional Emmy Award winner, 2017. This is something that I've never heard of, and this is something pretty cool. Positivity in Broadcasting Award from Positive Athlete Georgia. Tell us a little bit about that award that you received, which again is extremely honorable.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it was quite a shock to me to get it. That group, and it will eventually expand to all 50 states. But what they do, they focus in on athletes that might not be the best player on their team, but they have such an incredible spirit that they want the coaches and the schools want them to be recognized. It might be a cheerleader, it might be, a team manager, but somebody that is really outstanding at what they do, but might not be the headline getter, that the 5-star recruit might get. So they put this together. It was the brainchild of Hines Ward, if you remember Hines when he played for the Steelers, played here at the University of Georgia. And he started it in Pittsburgh, and it's come to Georgia and is in several other states now, and it will go nationwide. But that's what that group is all about. They do tremendous work. The stories just tear your heart out of what these young kids have overcome to just participate in a sport, and they get recognized. And so the group found it worthwhile to send a little love my way, and I really do appreciate that, because the one thing I do with the broadcasts, stay positive. Nothing comes from pessimism. Everything comes from optimism, and I've always lived my life that way, and I hope that you all do too, because it's the only way to go in the end.
Yeah, you were named Virginia Sportscaster of the Year 6 times, Georgia Sportscaster of the Year 1998, 2012 by the National Sportscasters and Sports Writers Association, and you were also inducted into the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame in 2008. Now, being inducted into the Hall of Fame, this is now the second Hall of Fame, Bob, that you were inducted to. Give us a little bit of background on how you feel when you got that call to be on a even bigger stage.
Well, it was so humbling, because I spent 14 years up working in Norfolk, and the sports in our state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, means a lot to me. And it wasn't just what I did in Norfolk. It was the UVAs and Virginia Techs and the James Madisons and all the George Masons and all these great schools. And it was a labor of love, no doubt, to be able to work in that state and call games in different levels, with William and Mary football and Old Dominion, and then later on television, and doing ACC games for 30 years, going to Virginia and Virginia Tech. So it really meant a lot to me, because doing the games in Virginia meant a lot to me, and still does. I relish the opportunities that I get to go back to Charlottesville or Blacksburg or Norfolk, Richmond, what have you, because so many friends and get to see them. So meant a lot.
Now, going back to, or actually, as we said earlier in the program, just like The Last Dance, rewinding back, I want to touch upon your time with the Detroit Tigers, and it was, I'm assuming, for you to take over for a legend in Ernie Harwell. I can't even imagine to be, and just to think of the current broadcasters today in all of like Joe Davis taking over for Vin Scully, or in the hockey world, Alex Foss taking over for the legendary Bob Miller for the LA Kings. And for you being able to do that and saying Bob Rathbun took over for Ernie Harwell, what was that like for you in the early 90s to be able to say, okay, I have some big shoes to fill here?
Yeah, it was an interesting time, to say the least. They had, Ernie and Paul Carey did the Tiger broadcast, and Paul retired, and Ernie did one final year in 1991, and both chairs were open. And I went with a good friend. Rick Riz was the number one guy in Detroit, and then I was the number two guy. And we went into a situation that neither of us felt like was going to be the hornet's nest that it turned out to be. I had done, and Rick had been in Seattle for a long time, and we both came up in minor league baseball. He was at Columbus when I was at Tidewater, and like all young broadcasters in the minor leagues, we got that dream of making it one day to the major leagues. And I got the call. It's funny because the Tigers did the hiring, and they called me and said, "You're someone we'd like to talk to." And this is like in the fall of 1991, and a gentleman named Doc Finkel gave me and Rick the call and said, "We'd like to talk to you, but you're not going to hear from me for 2 months, so just relax." Okay. And what Doc did, this is so unique. Now, remember, this is 1991. Okay. So they're cassette tapes. And there were, I think they told us there were like 250 applicants for these 2 jobs. And what Doc did was, first he settled on Rick as the number 1 guy. And then he said, well, who are we going to get to go with him? And he would put Rick's tape in one side of the cassette player and everybody else's tape one by one on the other side. And he would listen to them alternately to see which ones matched. And he said, well, I think this guy goes best with this guy. And that's how we ended up coming together to get the job. And Bo Schembechler was the president of the Tigers at the time. And I could not have worked for a better boss. Obviously, if you know the background of Bo and his legendary coaching status, he is a Michigan through and through, one of the biggest sports profiles in that state. And he was the president of the Tigers. My manager was Sparky Anderson. And I just thought this was going to be so much fun. I finally made it. Yeah. Well, it turned out to be like the biggest nightmare Rick and I have ever had. We were not wanted. We were not accepted. And that's by the media and the fans. I mean, they wanted Ernie Harwell, and they were going to get rid of whoever came in their place. So that was very tough. And the toughest thing about it, Joey, was the fact that we were on the air for 3 months of our first year, and the ball club was sold. Mike Ilitch and his family, who own it to this day, bought the team from Tom Monahan, the 2 pizza guys swapping. And when Mr. Ilitch took over, out went Bo Schembechler, out went the 2 other people who were directly responsible for hiring both of us. And we're sitting there looking at each other like, what have we gotten ourselves into? Yeah. And, but, Sparky and those guys, to their credit, they stuck by us, and, we hung in there for 3 years and then got the gate. But, I've wrestled with this for so many years. I'm at peace with it now, but it was hard because we never had a chance. I mean, never had. They could have brought in Bob Costas and Vin Scully, and the reaction, I think, would have been the same. They just did not want us around. They wanted Ernie Harwell, and Ernie Harwell only. And whoever came in next, God bless you. I remember saying to my wife, Mary Beth, I said, boy, woe be unto the guys that replaced them. And little did I know that I was going to be one of the 2 guys that ended up replacing him. So it was a nightmare, no doubt about it. We never had never a moment of joy in Detroit. Well, I will say this, Bob. I really do appreciate you opening up about it. Because honestly, but it's a lesson to young broadcasters. Yeah. I mean, it can happen. It's not going to be all a bed of roses all the time. I think back to how the industry has changed. We started our conversation talking about Marty Brennaman, who for the whole time he did the games, very outspoken. He was called in on the carpet by the league president, and, he had a tough relationship with Dick Wagner, his first general manager. And he said things on the radio that I don't think broadcasters can say today. Clubs have gotten to the point, and I think it began when Marv Albert got fired by the Knicks, that the teams were going to control what you say. Yeah. And if you don't toe the line, they're going to get rid of you. And it's really changed the way play-by-play works. And I think young broadcasters have to be aware of that. I think those of us who've been doing it a while, we have a little more freedom, but mostly, if you're not right down the line for the team, you're in jeopardy of losing your job, and that's not good for our business. But
Yeah.
that's sort of the way that the thing has evolved. So I'd like to hear, what you all think about that too at some point. But it's different. There's no doubt about that. It is different.
Yeah, it's extremely different. Again, I can for sure attest to that by being a freelance guy up here, and especially working in the New York market.
Mhm.
As a young buck like myself, it's so tough, Bob. It's and I can't even imagine what the even younger broadcasters, they think of it now. It's definitely crazy. And also now in the age of social media, now, yeah, and that's another thing too. And it's funny because we've now had, you are the fifth play-by-play man in professional sports that we've had on here, and you are the fifth person to give basically that exact reaction that you just gave,
Right.
because it is so difficult in this day and age with social media to keep your head up high when, okay, you see someone that could say something like, as you said earlier, you were unwanted in Detroit. And now you can say to yourself, well, okay, now imagine if that was like, if social media was way back then. How do you keep your head up high when you say to yourself, okay, it's only social media. You have to, you have to keep your shoulders back, do your job. You can't
Mhm.
have, you have to just have the blinders on, look forward the whole time.
Right.
How do you deal with it, Bob, in your, I guess, in this age of social
Right.
media for you?
My philosophy on it, particularly with Twitter, I use it only as a vehicle to promote our
Yeah.
broadcasts. That's it. I offer no opinions. I will try to crack a few jokes from here, from time to time,
Smart man.
but I do not engage in anything other than the support of the team. Watch our broadcast, watch the Braves, watch Atlanta United. Uh, you know, Anything that the club posts where we have interaction with our players, our
Yeah.
coaches, and promote that. But no way
Yeah.
am I ever going to say anything on social media. And I don't do a lot of Instagram or
Yeah.
I'm on Facebook, but mainly with Fox, and trying to think what else. LinkedIn professionally,
Right.
but I don't do Snapchat and the rest of them. But I just don't think you can. It is such a loaded gun.
Oh,
I mean, you
yeah.
can look at what happened in Sacramento. Uh,
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
I mean, all it you're 32 years down the drain for one tweet. It just it's scary to me, and you have to wonder: has anything ever good come of social media? Um,
No.
I mean, really, I mean, has any good come out of it?
No.
Everybody's in a fight. Everybody's got something to say. Everybody's got an opinion. The cancel culture, you name it.
Right.
You just have to. I think, in my personal opinion, is that uh, you just have to say, I'm using this to promote my brand
Right.
and my broadcasting and my team, and
Yeah.
that's it.
Right.
I think I couldn't do it. If you feel comfortable wading into those waters, have at it. But I there is no way that I would offer any personal opinion on anything,
No.
on anything. No way.
I agree completely. It is ever since I saw what happened in Sacramento, it is such a that's basically where I could leave it at. You're left speechless.
Right.
But again, on a more positive note, because obviously now in today's day and age, things could take a quick turn for the
Mhm.
negative, and we're trying to keep our viewership positive and everything. Now with summer officially coming up in the next couple of days, obviously down in Atlanta or down in
Mhm.
the state of Georgia, it's been extremely hot for the last, I don't know how many months, Bob. You can attest to that. It's probably been ridiculously hot all the way back in March or February, but up here in New York, it's slowly getting there. But now we actually started something called an ice cream flavor poll because we need something good to look forward to.
Yeah.
So, and
you go.
we've had the voices of the San Jose Sharks on for hockey. We've had the Chicago Cubs hitting coach Anthony Iapoce on. We've had former NFL wide receiver Cecil Shorts III on, whose favorite ice cream cookie dough and strawberry. We've had Stanley Cup champion from the Carolina Hurricanes, Brett Hedican on, Americone from Ben & Jerry's, Randy Hahn from NBC Sports California, Strawberry, New York Islanders radio voice Chris King, Moose Tracks from Turkey Hill, and also San Jose Sharks radio voice Dan Rusanowski is Vanilla and Black Raspberry. So let's add Bob Rathbun to the list. Number 23. Bob, your favorite ice cream is?
Chocolate chip.
Chocolate chip. Excellent. Okay, so that you are actually the first one to say chocolate chip. We have
chocolate chip aficionado.
We have two mint chocolate chips. That's pretty good. So we will add Bob Rathbun and chocolate chip. So
there you go.
That's excellent. So now the one last question for you.
Yes, sir.
During these tough times, it's very difficult to keep the mental state high when you're told to be inside. An athlete, sportscaster, anything along those lines. What is your advice to those that are having some mental issues to try and keep their heads back, shoulders back, heads up high, to basically stay on course?
Well, the first thing I would say is do not be embarrassed to call for help. If you're struggling, there are people in all sorts of different arenas that will sit and talk to you on the phone, on a Zoom call like this. There are people out there, and don't think you're the Lone Ranger. There's a lot of people struggling with being inside. That said, I think having a routine really helps. Lots of ways to do that. I think one of the big things for most people to decide is, are you a morning person or a night person? And if you're one or the other, then don't fight it. Try to do the other. Yeah. If you're a morning person, well, get up at 5 a.m. Yeah. It's nice and quiet. Do some reading, go for a walk, whatever your routine might be. But don't try to stay up till 2 a.m. If you're a morning person. If you're a night person, sleep in, and do your best work at 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I would recommend that first and foremost. But I think having a routine is very, very important. The funny thing too, Joey, is my morning routine here at the desk in the man cave here hasn't changed. The same thing. I go through the papers, I go through all the clippings, I go through all the online stuff. But what's different is I don't have a game to get ready for.
Right.
I don't have to go to practice. I don't get on the plane. I don't, I'm not going to the arena. So that's what's different. I get to about 2 or 3 in the afternoon and I'm like, okay, it's time to get going, and there's nowhere to go. But use this time. It's been so valuable to me. It's been such a blessing to have this time, not only with the family, but also time to learn. I have learned so much about pick and roll basketball, watching coaching clinics. Can't tell you how it's broadened my horizons. And it will be a help to me when I get back to broadcasting the TBT in a couple of weeks. There are so many opportunities out there to use this extra time that we have to read more, to research more, to watch more, take advantage of it. But I think having a structure helps in these times, because it's very easy not to. It's very easy to let the day slip away and you look at your watch and it's 7 o'clock at night and you say, well, I didn't do a thing today. So have that structure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult, especially again, whenever it's raining, especially in the month of April, when it was raining. April showers bring May flowers. But again, in that month of April, when you're told to stay inside, you can really lose track. And I'm guilty of it. It's very difficult, especially again, when there's nothing to do, there's no game to get prepared for. Extremely difficult. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Rathbun, the Atlanta Hawks play-by-play voice and one of the most noticeable voices in all of professional sports. Bob, I cannot thank you enough for joining me here this Thursday evening. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure all the viewers have appreciated it. And I really hope that I didn't take too much of your time up.
No, this has been great, Joey. Thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on. And the next time you see Coach Gannulin, you tell him that old Bob's down here in Atlanta. I still got my eye on you, Coach. You walk the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll definitely tell Ronnie that. That's great. So just before you do go, Bob, I just want to say our closing credits. Join our friends Kurt, Kenny, Jim, and Petro on Saturday night, June 20th, starting at 8 p.m. As they talk all things sports over at the K&K Show, airing Wednesdays and Fridays live on their Facebook page and our sister station, the I-95 Sports Network. For more information, check out their Facebook page at the K&K Sports Show or visit i95sportsnetwork.com. Also, episode number 8 of the Essential Wrestling Podcast with my co-host, Tyler Adele. Also with Al Carl. They will be broadcasting number 8 on Tuesday, June 23rd at 6 p.m. For Bob Rathbun, I'm Joey Jarzynka. A new episode of Viva Los Bills begins right now. All right, Bob. Really appreciate you taking the time again.
My pleasure.
Thank you so